Hello everyone, and to Grappling with Canada. I am your host, as usual, the Taxman, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to episode 2. Today we're looking at the life and career of Dino Bravo. Now, many of you are familiar with the Dino Bravo story from the tremendous Dark Side of the Ring episode entitled The Assassination of Dino Bravo. Now, if you haven't seen this episode, I highly encourage you, after you listen to this program, obviously don't drop what you're doing to go watch it, but it's a great companion piece to this program because they go into a little bit more detail of the unfortunate end that we do. Not that we're trying to skirt it, but because it's something very difficult to talk about. So, and much like this program, the Dark Side of the Ring episodes are not just for wrestling fans. So if you're listening to this program because you like Canadian history, or you're listening to it because you want to hear more about the people that we're talking about, same thing, right? That program does a very good job of illustrating, the people behind Dino Bravo. So anyways, after you listen to this program, I highly encourage you to check out that Dark Side of the Ring episode. Now, before we kick off today's episode, we have a few housekeeping items to address. tinyurl.com/grapplingwithcanada is this show's website. And on that site, as of today, you're going to see some links to books written by a couple of authors that you're going to hear later in this program. Now those links kick back a little, tiny bit, minuscule, whatever you want to call it, portion of proceeds to put food on the table, if you will, here at the program. So I would highly encourage you, after you listen to this program, because honestly, after you hear the guests, you're going to want to buy the books. Much like many of you did with Heath McCoy's book. On our first episode, he had written essentially the Bible of Stampede Wrestling, and I know a few of you had gone out and picked up that book because of the program. You're going to want to hear what they have to say, and then you're going to want to pick up their books, because they really are wrestling history royalty. And I'll be completely honest and just say that much. So, once again, tinyurl.com/grapplingwithcanada while you're listening to this program. Hit that website, hit the links on there, and once again, a small portion gets kicked back to this program, but it doesn't add 1 single cent to your purchasing price. In addition to that, if you're listening on one of the various podcasting platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, whatever, wherever you buy, trade, steal, sell, barter your favorite podcasts, you can find us. If you can't find us, let me know. I'll get it to you wholesale. Or you can go on youtube.com/c/Six-Sided Podcast, and I once again want to make mention, and I'm going to mention it at the end of the show as well. We are on our race to 1,000 subscribers, and when we hit that magical mark, one lucky subscriber will be winning a fantastic prize pack, and I'm probably going to start dropping some little hints on that, what that prize pack entails in the coming weeks on Twitter, which you can find me at 6_podcast. So now that we got all the plugs out of the way from myself personally, we're going to get into the meat of this program on the other side of...
Hey everybody, Trent from Total Nonstop Impact. Impact Talk for Impact fans, the #1 Impact Wrestling podcast and discussion show on the planet. Tuesday night post shows after Impact on Access TV. Thursday night TNA Asylum throwbacks. Sunday night Impact Plus Weekly Explosion Talk and Open Forum. All the pay-per-views in between and the breaking news. Whatever's happening in Impact Wrestling, we're covering it. Join us at Total Nonstop Impact at twitch.tv/Total Nonstop Impact, youtube.com/Total Nonstop Impact, and all major podcast platforms.
The Wrestling Estate. Pro wrestling journalism that doesn't copy and paste Dave Meltzer's work. A palace of sovereign wrestling news and interviews. Find our website at www.thewrestlingestate.com. Follow us on Twitter at TheWrestlingEST. Follow us on Instagram at TheWrestlingEstate2019. And follow us on Facebook at The Wrestling Estate. And to contact us, email us at thewrestlingestate@gmail.com.
Now, before I get any further, I just want to give a couple of special shout-outs. I was very gracious to be offered the opportunity to join a couple of programs the last couple of weeks, so My good friends from across the pond in Cork, Ireland had me on Just Because Wrestling. We were talking some Impact Wrestling. We were talking about this show. We previewed the Hard to Kill pay-per-view. You can find them on Twitter at JB Wrestling 1991, and I'm going to put their Twitter link in with the first round of tweets that go out for this podcast. Also, I was very happy to be on the program that you just heard, Total Nonstop Impact with Trent and the rest of the crew, except you, Kyle. Got no love for you, Kyle. You tried to steal my gimmick. But anyways, it was a tremendous time. We talked about this program. I'm going to be joining them in a couple of weeks for one of their Impact Wrestling weekly review shows. And honestly, they're just a fantastic group of people, and they do so much for just the scene of professional wrestling. So definitely want to give them a follow at We Talk Impact. And again, I'm going to include them with the links as we kind of kick off the Twitter portion of the promotion of the show. Now, we all know why we're here today. We're going to talk about Dino Bravo. Now, like I said at the start of the program, we do discuss the end of his life. Now, I do want to make mention, and I know that some people, it's a very hard subject to want to discuss or talk about or listen to, and I completely understand that. I want to assure everybody that we do not, on this program, try to sensationalize it. We don't talk about it in a way that's demeaning. We don't discuss it in a way that's inappropriate. And the two guests that you're going to hear later in this program, Bertrand Hebert and Pat Laprade, and myself, we do a very good job to talk about what happened without discussing kind of the sensational part of it. And I think that's really important. There's much more to Dino Bravo, as you're going to hear in this program, than just how it ended. Again, I know that we have to talk about it because it is part of the story, but I just want to make it implicitly clear to everybody that we are not talking about it in a sensational or disgusting or disturbing way. We tried very hard to manage it about as well as we could. So you're going to hear me in the interview itself with Pat and Bertrand. When we get to that part, I'm not going to lie, I had a hard time with it. And I think a lot of that is because, look, Dino Bravo passed away in his early 40s. He had one daughter. I'm in my mid-30s. By the time I'm the same age that Dino was when he passed away, my oldest daughter will be the same age as his daughter was. So for me, it just kind of hit, right? And I know that you're supposed to separate yourself from the material that you're covering, but I have to be honest, and because you can hear it in the audio, and I left it in because it's not something that I wanted to sugarcoat or to try and make seem that, you know, he doesn't, he being me, pronouns pal, that I don't have any emotional connection to this. I do. And it's that aspect of it that I'm emotionally connected to. So that's why I left it in. That's why we discussed it in the manner that we did, and I hope that everybody can respect it, and I hope that everybody doesn't skip that portion of the program. It's not very long, but we do it justice, and that's the nicest thing I can say about it. I also am joined at the start of the program by Conor McKenna. Now, he is the host of the morning show on TSN 690. That is the English broadcast station for the Montreal sports scene, essentially. And he does a very good job of kind of illustrating what the Montreal sports scene is like, because, and I talk about it in our interview with him, in our sports scene in Winnipeg, for example, yes, we're very passionate. We have the Winnipeg Jets, we have the Whiteouts. If you go to a Jets game, you can barely hear yourself talk. If you go to a Blue Bombers game, there's 35,000 people and they're going crazy, right? There's that aspect of it kind of translates to what it is like in Montreal, but there are certain subtleties that are much different between how Winnipeg is, how we view our teams, how we view our sports stars, and how it is in Montreal. And you're going to hear that from Conor, and you're also going to hear that from Pat and Bertrand Hebert when they talk about guys like Dino Bravo or Edward Carpentier or Jacques Rougeau, just how these individuals mattered more in Montreal than just a Jonathan Taves does in Winnipeg, or how, you know, you can go any sports star from any city, right? Yes, they're very important. Yes, they're not integral, but they're a part of the fabric of the community. But in Montreal, these people are very much of the community. They are a very large part, and not just athletes. Connor brings up a fantastic point about Leonard Cohen and what he meant to the cultural scene and how his passing kind of affected everything. So all things that we talk about in this program, just to kind of give the backstory of what Montreal means, of what the people of Montreal mean to the sports scene of professional wrestling, and more importantly, what it means to the rest of Canada. Because, once again, this podcast is not specifically meant for wrestling fans. Yes, it is a wrestling-centric podcast, but again, I'm trying to make this appeal to, or be accessible to, I guess is a better way to say it, to everybody. We all can do a little bit better by learning a little bit more of where we came from, why things are the way they were or are, who the people were that influenced a lot of the things that we see nowadays. So it's very important to learn, not just Canadians, but internationally as well. So once again, everybody, thank you for joining the program. We're going to get into this. Our first clip that you're going to hear leads directly into my conversation with Connor. Now, in this clip from the CBC, it's from 2005, so this is at a time when the NHL lockout was in effect. And hockey is, to say it's a big part of Canada, is quite the understatement. So this program was highlighting a look back at the Montreal riots. Now, for historical context, these riots took place after Maurice Richard was suspended by the NHL for actions against the referee. And to say that the fans in Montreal did not take it well is an understatement. The reason I'm including this in the program is because it kind of gives a nice backstory or a nice backdrop of what we get into with Conor McKenna. Just the temperature and tenor of the fans in Montreal. So I'm going to play this clip, and then we're going to get into the interview with Conor McKenna.
Even with no NHL teams to cheer on this winter, hockey fans remain a passionate lot, always eager to show their colors. But the fervor of recent times pales with what we saw 50 years ago today. It started out as a hockey game in Montreal, but it ended up being known as the Richard Riot. And along the way, went from the sports page to the front page to the history books. Michel Godbout reports.
Jules Bélanger sits in what used to be the Montreal Forum. 50 years ago, at 19 years old, he was in the same spot, watching the Canadians play without Maurice Rocket Richard.
We were not in the game that night, neither the hockey players, neither the fans.
Voici Rocket Richard.
A few nights before, Richard was on the ice. The Canadians were playing a rough game in Boston. A fight broke out. The Rocket hit a referee while fighting with another player. For that, NHL President Clarence Campbell suspended him for the season and the playoffs. On March 17th, Richard watched from the stands, and so did Campbell.
At the level of the people, the reaction of the fan was a very gut-feeling reaction, very emotional feeling. They've touched our hero, they've touched Richard.
Red Story reffed that game.
You knew something was going to happen, but you didn't know what. And Campbell should not have been at the game. And if he had not been at the game, we would have had no riot. But he dared the public.
And Canadians fans took up the dare.
That bomb, that tear gas bomb exploded in the exit. Everybody got scared and the forum went empty. So you had 15,000, 16,000 people all of a sudden in the street at the same time.
On the side, the rioting raged on for hours.
16 people were arrested and fined $25 each, a week's salary at the time. 8 policemen and 25 fans were injured. Damages totaled $100,000.
And all this happened at a time when Quebec's economy was being managed mostly by English Canadians. Some say the Richard riot signaled the coming of age of French Canadians. Campbell, the Anglophone, suspending Richard, the Francophone hero, was simply the last straw. Michel Godbout, CBC News, Montreal.
All right, I'm very pleased to be joined this afternoon by the host of the morning show in TSN 690 in Montreal, Conor McKenna. Thank you for joining the program today.
Yeah, good to be with you.
I'm very happy to have you today, especially considering, and we were talking off air, the plethora of guests you had to talk about Montreal sports this morning. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, it's Fridays are always a crazy day, right? You got the weekend to look forward to, and right now we're in full blown sports mode. We've got Super Bowl is a week away. We've got the NHL and NBA seasons underway. The Royal Rumble is this weekend if you're into that sort of thing. What am I forgetting? There's all kinds of stuff. There's news, and it's fun. It's after what we went through from April to, what was it, I guess, June, July last year. It's nice to have a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a lot better to talk about actual sports than conjecture of such for yourself being on a sporting program. Yeah, dead air is not the way to go for sure.
You know what though? We last year it was a challenge, but it was actually really fun and in a way kind of liberating not to have to watch sports for a while. As much as I do love watching sports, it's nice to sort of not feel like I necessarily have to spend 3 hours every night doing it. But I'm glad it's back for sure.
You and most Canadians, especially on the hockey side of things. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on the program today, because for the international audience and even Canadians, west of Ontario, we often hear that the sports scene in Montreal is different. The crowds are different. The atmosphere is different. The anticipation is different. But we often don't get to hear why it's different. What makes Montreal so special? Obviously, there's a huge following for the Montreal Canadiens, especially outside of Montreal. If you go to a Winnipeg Jets game, for example, and the old barn is almost 50% Montreal Canadiens jerseys, is pretty impressive. But I just wanted to get your take as someone who obviously covers sports in Montreal. Just what makes the atmosphere there so special? What is so different with the Montreal crowds that you don't seem to find in the rest of Canada and especially in international markets?
It's a complicated question. I mean, I can't answer as if I know for sure. I certainly have my theories on the topic. Part of it, I think, is history. It's just that Montreal it's an old city. It's a much older city than the other ones that you just referred to. And the Canadiens are an older team than a lot of the teams that play in this country. And so you have a lot of just the history is a huge part of it, I think. And Montreal's not, it's not as, I'd say it's like the least stuck-up Canadian city, in a way. And I think the whole French thing is a big part of that. But it's been, right? Like, Montreal, I think most reasonable people who've spent time here would agree that it's the most fun city in Canada. By and large, right? Like, Toronto there's fun to be had in Toronto for sure, but I don't think most people are like, I'm going to do my bachelor party in Toronto. Like, I'm sure people do that, and good for you, but Montreal, there's a reason people do stuff like that, or a bachelorette or whatever else. It's a more fun city. It's a more relaxed city. The bars stay open later. The laws tend to be a little bit more relaxed. People in general are a little bit more relaxed. There's this sort of European flavor that I think, Toronto is, and it always has been kind of known as this sort of a bit more of a stuck-up type city. And frankly, English versus French, I think French Canadians, and I don't want to speak for all French Canadians, but I would say that there's a feeling amongst French Canadians that Anglos and rest of Canada types are maybe a little bit less fun, a bit less willing to have fun, not as off the wall or comfortable with themselves. And yeah, I think stuck up is probably the right word. I work in an environment that mixes both French and English, right? There's 6 radio stations that operate on the floor that I work on at Bell, and 2 of them are French. So it's kind of this unique English-French work environment. And they're just way more loud and have way more fun and laugh way more and drink mimosas in the morning, and we're just not like that, and I think it's a good illustration. But I think you see that a little bit in when it comes to the representation of the hockey team. It's just Montreal is just different. It's not like any other place in Canada, and I think it kind of manifests itself when it comes to the support of the team.
Now, it's not just the team. I often find that sports stars that come out of Montreal are much more celebrated than sports stars that come from other parts of the country. Like, for instance, I'm in Winnipeg, so we have, you have Jonathan Taves, you have a wrestler like Chris Jericho, you have homegrown CFL stars like Andrew Harris. They're celebrated, but it often doesn't seem to be at the same level as people from Montreal would celebrate somebody like Maurice Richard or somebody like GSP or somebody like Patrick Waugh. It almost seems like maybe it is kind of what you're saying, that whole they're more fun aspect. Maybe because they're more personable to that audience is more receptive to kind of falling more in love with them. I don't know if that's the proper way to say it, but that's kind of the way it seems to me, at least.
There's, I think part of it too is this fierce nationalist pride that exists here in a way that I'd say that French Quebecers are proud of their own heroes in a way that's different from other provinces, because of the fact that I think that it's so insular to begin with, right? I mean, imagine you're surrounded on all sides, north, south, east, west, by English, and it's this place that's just sort of managed to stay French by and large for such a long period of time. And I think there is, I mean, I can't speak to this for sure, but there's something about Quebecois for Quebecers, especially French-speaking Quebecers, and successful ones, and especially GSP being a great example of this. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, the football player, is another one recently, of like people who go out and make the province proud on an international stage.
Yes.
Even more so, and the hockey players, I think we could get into sort of a different discussion, but there is really a huge amount of pride. I think much the way we feel as Canadians, proud of amazing Canadians and Canadians who do amazing things, that Quebecers sort of do have that feeling. I'm trying to think what would be a good example of a Canadian that we all just are so proud of and happy about, and everybody agrees upon.
Would probably be someone like Gretzky, I would assume.
Sure, yeah. I guess so, and I mean, a good example. So right, Gretzky, and he's a legend. One name, one number, 99.
Yes.
And in Quebec, we have our own Gretzky, Mario.
Yes.
One name, one number, 66. Right, and I think that sort of speaks to it a little bit for sure. And if you were to go across Canada and say, do a survey asking somebody in every province or a bunch of people in every province who the greatest hockey player of all time is, you get Gretzky in every province. And I'm pretty sure in Quebec you'd probably get like 60% of people saying that it's Mario. I would say, and I'm not even French, I would say Mario personally, my favorite.
I guess the other part, and it's funny you mentioned the passion part of it. A couple of my guests later in the program are big proponents of the Quebecois scene, if you will, for lack of a better term, of the French-Canadian wrestling scene. And hearing them in our conversations about Dino Bravo, you can just hear the excitement. You can just the level of excitement when they're talking about what Dino did, or they're talking about someone like Edouard Carpentier or whatever. Just you can hear it in their voice. You can feel it in the interview, just how excited they are to talk about the history of Montreal, what these guys mean and meant to them. It's, yeah, like you said, it's something else.
Yeah, there's like a Dino Bravo mural on just a random wall that I used to where I used to live in St. Henry, southwest Montreal, and there's this weird mural in the middle of a residential neighborhood of Dino Bravo. I think it says "Lâche pas la patate." I don't know what it means, but I used to walk by it every day on my way to the metro. It was funny. And
again, it kind of ties into things that you don't normally see. Like, I know that there's like one mural in Winnipeg of Billy Mosienko on his bowling alley, but there's even things like that you don't really see here. Yes, we have murals. I'm not saying that we're not cultured here or anything like that, but not of sports stars or sports stars, not of people who are integral to the kind of fabric of the community, not like you would see in Montreal. And I've been to Montreal. I think the last time I was in Montreal, I think it was 2008. And it's such a wild city. Like, I shouldn't just specifically say Montreal, but any city in Quebec, it feels so timeless. Like the way the streets are designed, the way the architecture is, everything is just so interesting. I don't know. It's really hard to describe. I couldn't imagine living there. Like the kinds of things that you've probably seen from city to city has got to be incredible.
Yeah, I love Montreal. I've been lucky to do quite a lot of traveling, whether for work or just because of my life, because I like to travel. And Montreal's amazing, man. It's a great city. I'm always happy to come home. I don't know how cold it is in Winnipeg today, but it is cold today in Montreal. It's like minus 25 with the wind or something, although it's probably worse in Winnipeg. But that's part of it, right? I mean, it's part of, and I'm sure you'd say the same about Winnipeg, is that, yeah, the cold is awful. I mean, who can make a case for minus 37 with the wind chill? It's terrible. I mean, no matter how you slice it, but it's part of the character. It's part of what makes a place great. Everybody's sort of in it together, and you find a way to overcome it. You can exchange sort of a knowing glance with the other people that are out walking their dogs in this terrible weather, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a big part of it's the history. If you haven't been here since 2008, it's changed a lot, but it's also very much the same as it was. I can't wait to see how we sort of come out of the pandemic, assuming that ever happens. But murals and stuff, there's these great, huge Leonard Cohen murals that have gone up since he died. An amazing Jackie Robinson mural off St. Laurent Boulevard that's really, really cool. There's a history. He played minor league baseball here before he played for the Dodgers. But there's and the city does a great job of it, is promoting the culture. And the culture can be a great artist like Leonard Cohen or an amazing athlete like Jackie Robinson. And there is a kind of a way that they do it here, that these things can kind of intersect in a really organic way. That people, even if you're not a sports fan, you can certainly appreciate Jackie Robinson.
Definitely,
and just to see an amazing, some artist put up this amazing mural of the guy right next to this, maybe a block away from this amazing Leonard Cohen thing that somebody put up. It's a great illustration of how sports kind of can sort of transcend and certain athletes, and it's not all of them, but you've mentioned a couple of them already, can really sort of just become immortals in this city.
Just as touch back to the weather portion, I think we're about the same temperature today, although the past few days it was what did we hit? I think our high was minus 35 or so. We're in this is our time of the year where it gets pretty brutal like that, but I mean, like you said, it builds character, if you will, so there's that to look forward to.
Honestly though, I do wonder about this sometimes when I'm talking about Winnipeg, when I'm like, okay, so Patrick Laine doesn't want to be there anymore. And it's like, why is that? It's like, well, is it that crazy to suggest that because hockey season coincides with winter, because from what I've heard, and to be fair, I've never been to Winnipeg, but I've heard great things about Winnipeg in the summer and Lake Winnipeg in the summer, and Manitoba is a beautiful province with a ton to offer for sure. But if I have the option to live there in January or live in fucking anywhere else, I'm going to choose to live anywhere else. If I'm a millionaire with options, it's who wants to be in minus 40 degree weather? But we're Canadians and we accept it, and our families settled where they settled, and we ended up where we ended up. But I do wonder sometimes, because you'll never hear them say this, right? It's not like a hockey player is going to be like, yeah, you know what? Me and my wife we can't deal with the climate. It's too much for us, because they'll get absolutely roasted for it.
They would get
it's
slaughtered.
Not inconceivable that people feel this way.
I'm trying to phrase this politically, but I don't think there's a way to do it. There's an old episode of The Simpsons with a sign on I don't remember what the exact context of the episode, but the sign says, "We're from Winnipeg, what's your excuse?" And that's kind of that's hitting the nail on the head, right? Why sports stars would choose to be here almost is an interesting, I guess, when you're drafted to a team and you have to play for them. But sure, the Laine situation, I don't know what all went behind there. I read some articles that he had done some interviews with some of the Finnish newspapers, and there was some kind of problem between him, Scheifele, and Wheeler. I'm not sure, and I don't want to speak off off color about that, but
I think it's him and Scheifele. I mean, that's my understanding. That people haven't really got on the record with it, but that him and Scheifele just were fire and ice. And I don't know if maybe Wheeler too, but he's been more diplomatic about it. But like they never played together, or when they did, it was early days, but they haven't played together for years. And Scheifele was like, I won't play with the guy. Anyway, that's what I've heard from like some pretty plugged in people.
Yeah, that's you're not far off, at least definitely from what I've heard as well. And then what Laine said in the Finnish newspapers kind of corroborates that as well. And
listen, I don't mean to suggest that Laine wanted to leave because of the weather, but I think the thing of it is, and I'm sure that as a Winnipegger that you can relate to this, is that in Montreal too, like our weather shit and the media the scrutiny is crazy, right? I mean, you have no anonymity. Everyone knows who you are.
Yes.
Everyone knows who lives next door, yada, yada, yada. And it's not for everybody. But for the guys that do embrace it, it makes the fans love them so much more, right? And I think that's true in Montreal with whether it's the Canadians or any other sport. And it's, I'm sure, true in Winnipeg as well. It's like, yeah, you're one of us. You have chosen to sign a long-term contract and spend your winters here with us, and that they love you for it. They'll always love you for it, and it's a great thing.
Yeah, when Wheeler signed his 7-year deal, like people are throwing babies in the air. Like it was a big. This guy wants to stay here for 7 years. It's a big deal, right? Because he's now accepted being here. He's one of us. Just like you said, right? It's really building that kind of sense of community where, yeah, he's a good player and he's a great ambassador for the team and all that kind of good stuff. But until you sign your name on the dotted line for an extended amount of time and you kind of prove, quote unquote, that you want to be here, right? Those are the kinds of things that really resonate with fans and really get them excited to call that player their own, for example.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's I hope Pierre-Luc Dubois succeeds and decides he wants to stay. I know his dad's there at the AHL team.
Yes.
But it's, especially because of what happened out there and losing the team the way that they did. That was pretty dirty. Great that you guys got a team back, but you want to see some success, man. Those fans deserve it. It's one of the best buildings in the league, and the sort of atmosphere is legendary.
So it's funny because this is a program about Dino Bravo and wrestling, but it's more than that. This is a program about Montreal, what it means, like what that city means, what these people mean, right? People often conflate things like, it's this guy was only a hockey player, or this guy was only a wrestler, or this guy was only a mixed martial arts fighter. There's so many different layers, and there's so many different opportunities and ways that these people kind of connect and get people excited and motivated, however you want to say it, to be a part of the community, and guys that can go above and beyond to translate their culture, whether it's French Canadian, whether it's Winnipeg or the stuck-up Toronto, for example, that they can kind of promote that culture abroad. It really does a good job of showcasing what those communities have to offer, and then obviously showcasing what the people from those communities have to offer as well. It's interesting that we can talk just about sports in general, but then go on a tangent of the arts or go on a tangent of anything else. Everything kind of intersects and kind of meets up with itself, if you will. It doesn't matter what walk of life you are. It doesn't matter, like, or the weather, for example, right? All these things that we have as shared experiences as Canadians. Just it's so interesting to me that we have the things that we go through in Winnipeg are similar to the things that you go through in Montreal, but are different on subtle levels. Obviously, I don't know. To me, it's just the more I do this program, the more it's fascinating to just talk about or talk with different people and hear their shared experiences and different viewpoints of what it is to be Canadian, essentially.
It's true, and it's also kind of depressing to me in a way, not what you're describing, but the fact that in many ways it seems like we're more disconnected than ever before, and like the the pandemic has really driven this home, but it's just how people are so insular in so many ways. Like the internet, I think, has really done it to people too, where they really get into their own sort of corner politically, or whatever rabbit hole they want to go into, and then they find other people that feel the same way, whatever side of the spectrum they might be on, and then they just become kind of awful and stop. They don't realize that other people are much more like them than they are different from them, and it's kind of an upsetting thing for me to think about, but I do find it's just become more and more true, where it's like people seem to empathize with one another less than ever before, and it's like, oh yeah, well, it's Toronto, fuck them. What? Like, why? Like, what is it? What is it that you have a problem with people from Toronto? Like, have you ever even been there? It's like, well, no, but
that's always it. Hey, no, but
right, okay, great. It's a shame, and I blame the internet in large part for that.
Well, unfortunately, we have to use the internet to get this program out there.
Hey,
so.
there's very good things about the internet too, right? I mean, it's just there are drawbacks. Ask anybody who's into QAnon or whatever.
Oh God, yeah, that's a whole other program in itself to go into kind of bullshit like that. Listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm sure you're obviously looking forward to some kind of a weekend. I know in Montreal, you guys are kind of in a lockdown right now with COVID-19. Like I said, the guests that I had talked to, and you're going to hear them later on the program, they were very happy to be talking to me after their 8 p.m. curfew because they can't do anything else. So
I'm locked down with my dog here.
Yeah, you guys can't see because this is audio only, but yeah, he's got a gorgeous puppy on his lap right now. So yeah, that's it's something nice to be locked down with for sure. Hey, listen, Connor, thank you very much for joining the program. Where can everybody go to find you, get in touch with you?
TSN690.ca is the website for the radio station that I work for. I'm actually launching a podcast, but we're still sort of working on the details.
Okay.
But we should have that going on in the next week or two. And on Twitter at McKenna Connor, Instagram at McKenna Connor, and yeah, thanks for the invite, Andy. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, when that podcast gets live, let me know, and I will be sure to get it up for everybody to check out. That'd be awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, man. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Before we move into the early life portion of the Dino Bravo story, I'm going to play this audio clip. Now, this is from 1990. In the audio clip, he's actually wearing a Montreal Canadiens jersey with Bravo #1 on the back, which is tremendous. Just really showcasing his love for the Montreal Canadiens, which you're going to hear a lot of when we're talking to Bertrand Hebert and Pat Laprade later on in the episode. But I'm going to play this audio, and then we're going to get to the early life portion of Dino Bravo's story.
Bravo #1. That's right, the bunkhouse brawl in the Boston Gardens. There are no rules. I can cross-check, I can high-stick, I can do whatever I want to people like the Hart Foundation, Tugboat, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. That's right, and as you all well know, the Montreal Canadiens always kick the butts of the Boston Bruins, and it's not going to be any different because, yes, I'm wearing the jersey, I'm going to win the bunkhouse brawl, and that's a promise from Earthquake 2.
Adolfo Bresciano was born in southern Italy to Mario and Acilio Bresciano. The family immigrated to Canada when Bresciano was young. They settled in a neighborhood of Montreal, and he started his amateur wrestling training at the age of 12. Now, after he had started his training under Gino Brito, he started his career in Montreal in the 1970s, getting the name Dino Bravo from Gino Brito. That was the name of one of his former tag team partners. In the 1970s, he was wrestling for Lutte Internationale. He became one of the top professional wrestling stars of Canada. He won major titles across Canada, across the United States, throughout the NWA, the Canadian Championships, and championships in the WWF. He won tag team titles with Dominic DeNucci in the WWF, and he was the sole holder of the WWF Canadian Championship when they had tried to develop that title before they abandoned it in 1986. Now, to discuss further about the career and life of Adolfo Bresciano, aka Dino Bravo, you're going to hear Pat Laprade and Bertrand Hebert, my conversation with them on the other side of this interview of Dino Bravo.
Japan. Now, as one who has wrestled against this giant individual, would you say that it is fair to say that Abdullah is, as he has always been described, the wildest man in professional wrestling?
Yes, he probably is, because, the thing that's a shame about it, that we tried to regulate some rules out there, and Abdullah's the first one to break him, and sometimes it happens within the first minute of the match. But promoters sometimes don't dislike the situation. See, like, people like those situations, they like those wild matches, they like brutal matches, and Abdullah is certainly a master of that.
He is certainly a brutal individual. How do you combat a man that's that powerful and that big, 450 pounds? I mean, it was obvious that you took an awful lot of punishment, as did he during the match we just witnessed.
Well, I think my chances were good to beat him. I've beat him before, and I think Abdullah is like anybody else. He's a human being. He feels the pain just as much as we do. It's just to go out there and not fear the man and be aggressive as much as you can, and hopefully not to get hurt before you hurt him. And that's the only way to look at it, at a match going into Abdullah the Butcher.
Have you ever been involved in a bloodier match than we've just seen?
I don't recall being involved in a bloodier match than that, but I recall tougher matches than that, probably, because I like to wrestle. My style is to go in there and wrestle. What Abdullah is just strictly a brawl. But, like I said before, he mastered that situation. He has to admit that he's good at that.
Well, it's interestingly enough, for a man who weighs, as you do, approximately in the 250-pound range, you have had significant success over the years wrestling against men the size of Abdullah, the Jerry Blackwells, etc.
Yeah, I love to wrestle bigger guys than I do. Maybe I psych myself better for those situations. I like to wrestle the big guy. I seem to have success that way. Now, hopefully I'll continue in that direction.
Well, I can't understand how you'd want to get into a ring with a man like Abdullah the Butcher. It was a wild one, I'll tell you. Folks, relax or whatever. There's a lot more action coming.
All right, I'm very happy to be joined on the program now with the two authors from the book Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs, The Untold Story of How Montreal Shaped the World of Wrestling, Mr. Pat Laprade and Mr. Bertrand Hebert. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to start with yourself, Bertrand. What in the world gave you guys the inspiration to write this book?
Well, we're two big wrestling fans. We were involved in the current local scenes for years. Pat had the idea to begin with to shine a light on those years and those people that before they were all gone. There was a concept of the 25 greatest wrestlers from the province of Quebec, and it started from there. I was lucky enough to join the project as he went along, as his original partner had to bail out. From there, it's just been a roller coaster, which led us to writing Maurice Mad Dog Vachon's biography, me leading to write the Pat Patterson biography with him. And then during that time, Pat wrote the Sisterhood of the Square Circle book. And recently, it led us to the Eighth Wonder of the World, the true story of Henry the Giant. So, it's really a passion project from the start to shine a light on those guys before it's too late, before we cannot speak to a Gino Brito, before we could not speak anymore to Pat Patterson, or before we could not speak to all of those incredible storytellers from an era that we'll never see again.
I find that such an interesting point, because that was really the premise of starting this program, because myself, speaking for myself, I'm 35, so I feel like it's my generation, and it's the men and women in their early 30s and their 20s who really need to do the research and start understanding who these people were in Canadian wrestling history and with the parts they played. Whether it's Dino Bravo, whether it's Pat Patterson, who didn't just invent the Royal Rumble. I know that's the common misconception, and you wrote a fantastic book on that. But it's just, if we are not carrying on the legacy of who these people were, then it's unfortunately going to get lost to the sands of time. Pat, for yourself, I know obviously you had a huge part to do with this book, but you also had a huge part to play in the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Dino Bravo as well, correct?
On Dino Bravo, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when the crew contacted me, I mean, it wasn't close to being, Dark Side of the Ring. I still didn't know what it was. I'm not even sure the guys knew all of what it would become. Because I truly believe that Dark Side of the Ring is the best wrestling documentary series that's ever been done. But when they contacted me, it was in 2018, and we didn't know what it would be. All they told me was that they were doing a few documentaries on wrestling, and they had done a few already, and now they wanted to do. They knew it was on the darker side of wrestling and everything, but it wasn't what it became, and so I put them in touch with all the people that needed to be talked to about Dino Bravo here in Montreal. So obviously Gino Brito, who knew Dino from when he was just a small kid, and who obviously teamed with Dino for the longest time, and was partner with him in international wrestling during the 1980s. Tony Muley, who was a very close friend to Dino. He the godfather of his only daughter, and he was also partner with. He was a promoter for the longest time here in Montreal, and a partner as well in international wrestling by the end of the promotion, and of course the most important people to me, which were his daughter Claudia, and later on his mom, not his mom, but her mom, Dino's widow, Tian. Because I mean, when I watched the documentary, I just thought that Claudia was like the star of the show. She was so good, so true. And it was kind of funny because I was the one asking the question, because my role was doing some research, but also doing questions off camera, because some of those people only spoke French, like one of the two crime journalists that were interviewed in the documentary. So I was the one asking the questions to Claudia. And I knew that one question would really get her, because I remember having those discussions with her. I knew Claudia for a number of years. She was one of my friends' sisters. She was her best friend, so I knew her for a long time. And the question was, what she would tell her dad if she could meet him right now. And I knew that she would get emotional on it, and she did when I asked her that on for the documentary. But when I watched it back, maybe 2 years later, a year and a half later, I still got wet eyes just by watching her answer that question, and then getting so emotional, because she lost her dad at a very young age, and he still means a lot to her. And so I just thought, the whole thing was very well done. Cannot say enough good things about the crew and everybody working on the documentary.
Yes, I had mentioned this earlier in the program, how well done that documentary series was done. The only unfortunate thing is that with the Dark Side of the Ring series, it seems that 80% of the stories are unfortunately Canadian content.
You think?
I don't know if that I don't know what that says about us up here in the frozen north, but in terms of wrestling lore and wrestling stories, certainly you can't find a bigger one than the story with Dino Bravo. So with your gentleman's permission and persuasion, we'll get into kind of how his professional wrestling career kicked off. So as far as I can tell, he started in the early 1970s, correct?
Well, he was part of the family, and he, as far as Gino has been always telling us, he always wanted to be a wrestler. So, and Gino, you know, knew him since he was in diaper. So that's a natural progression for him. He was naturally strong, and he loved the business. However, I mean, there was not a lot of room for a Quebec local to become a big star at that point in time because of the Rougeau's family and All-Star Wrestling. So that's why his career path was a little bit different than most local star, where he started to run his career a little bit outside, and he was moved to Grand Prix Wrestling right away, when the Grand Prix started, to get out of the shadow of the Rougeaus.
So I guess it's different, or it's far different in Montreal than it was in different parts of Canada or in the States for sure. In one city you had multiple promotions running, whereas, you know, in Winnipeg was primarily the AWA would run. Sometimes you'd have NWA the odd time with maybe Stampede. Out west, obviously, you had Stampede was the big one. Further out west, you had All-Star out in Vancouver, I believe. Bertrand, what do you think was the biggest hurdle for Dino to overcome coming or stepping into the ring in Montreal in the wrestling scene at that time?
I mean, it's like any other territory. I mean, but Montreal was very special. Is that, you know, it was always independent from all the big promotion. So it was never part of the NWA per se. It was it had good relation with everybody, and at different period in times they would get talent either from New York or from Charlotte or from Minnesota. So Dino's road was that, you know, right off the bat, Gino Brito saw something in Dino. And Dino, let's face it, had an ego. So he was not going to settle to being an undercard guy or to being just one of the middle of the pack guy. He wanted to be the guy. That seems from our research and interviews with people who worked with Dino at different point in time, that Dino had an ego and he saw himself as the star. That even brought some heat between him and Andre the Giant as they were partner in Montreal. So that from the start, that meant that he could not, you know, work under the Rougeaus, where Raymond was already the chosen one to succeed to his uncle and father. So he had to get out of that shadow. That's why Grand Prix was such a perfect timing for him. And also that was pretty unusual, and only I think Rick Martel really made it big names outside than Dino, because Dino worked the Carolinas, he worked Minnesota's, he did venture out to Winnipeg through the AWA,
yes,
and did things differently than most local star here, like Johnny Rougeau mainly became a big star here and built his wrestling empire here. So that was the difference. And that's why when the early 80s came and Gino had started the business and it was doing well with Hendry and Frank Valois as partners, I mean, Dino and Gino were family. So it just made sense to make Dino the star. And he got over huge in Montreal in the early 80s. I mean, the Hulk Hogan of Quebec is not just a figure of speech. That's the kind of reaction he was getting. That's the kind of aura he was projecting at the time.
Did you just compare Roman Reigns to Dino Bravo by saying the guy? I just want to add something on what Bertrand said. It was always hard on young local talents to make a name for themselves here in Montreal. And that was just not true during the 70s or the 80s. It was also true back in the 40s or the 50s. You know, ever since Eddie Quinn in 1939 came in to be the main promoter with his main star, Yvon Robert, it was always a very tough place for a local talent to actually be a real star. You know, it was you had to be the chosen one. You had to be the one that Yvon Robert would pick. So that's why, you know, even in the early 50s, guys like Hans Schmidt and Sammy Berg and Mad Dog Vachon were not able to make a living out of pro wrestling here in the province of Quebec. So they had to go abroad. They had to go make a name for themselves in the U.S., learn their craft, only to come back one day as a big star. Except for Johnny Rougeau, who was the chosen one, who was the guy that Yvon Robert took under his wing. So when Johnny Rougeau took over the territory after Eddie Quinn's passing and Yvon Robert's retirement, it pretty much became a family thing, in the sense that now the young guy was Ray Rougeau, his own nephew. So that's why guys like Martel and Bravo and other guys had trouble getting in. So Grand Prix was really a place where Dino could learn his craft, because for the first time in Montreal wrestling history, you had a war. You had a turf war between Grand Prix and All Star Wrestling. So instead of leaving the territory like Vachon did, or the guys did, and going to the U.S., he was able to stay here in Montreal, but for a big competition, which was Grand Prix. And not only that, but he was able to work under the wing of Gino Brito, who was like an uncle to him. So he was very lucky in that sense. So when international wrestling started in 1980, the local crowd knew who he was already. But at the same time, Dino was a different wrestler, because when the territory went dark between 76 and 80, when there was no TV, between the closing of All-Star Wrestling and the birth of international wrestling, Bravo, that's when he went to the U.S. That's, all the territories Bertrand spoke about. And so when he came back in the early 80s, he was more mature. He was more in control of what he wasn't a rookie anymore. So he became that huge star. And I know that for a lot of, especially Americans, who only saw him in the WWF at the end, mid to late 80s, they cannot understand why guys like Bertrand and I are so in awe, in front of what Bravo was here in Montreal, because they saw a version of Bravo that was so far away from what we witnessed from 1980 to 1985 here, so 1986. So Bravo and the old Cogan of Quebec, that's something that me and Bertrand are saying for a long time, and I really wanted to make sure that in the documentary people will actually know that, because I knew it was, it would be more of an American crowd, and I wanted people to really understand what Bravo represented for Montreal.
So I'll pose this question to both of you, because I've found a couple of different takes on it. I know that he spent quite a bit of time with Jim Crockett. Sorry, listen to me talk. In the Carolinas. So he won the NWA World Tag Team Championships with Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods. And then he also had a series of matches against Blackjack Mulligan. Now, there's some people who say that it's the tag matches with Woods that really put him over the top, especially them winning the title from Gene and Ole Anderson. But then there's some people that say that, no, it's the series with Blackjack, especially when he pinned him twice on televised events, non-title, mind you. But people will say that those were the big stepping stones for him. Just for each of you, whoever wants to go first, what would you say would be the biggest moment for Dino Bravo in the NWA that would have translated more to Montreal?
Go ahead, Bert.
Well, I mean, he ended up playing a part in the whole NWA Canadian Championship at some point in time. That, I think, led to how he was presented always as that Canadian international champion. That championship was even mentioned on WWE at some point when Dino started with them. So, I mean, I think he was always meant as a big star. But what you need to remember is that Dino was very good against those big guys like Blackjack Mulligan. He loved to bring those to Montreal because he was, the smaller guy, but the powerful guy that would take down those monsters. That's very similar to old-time booking of bringing in the monsters or bringing in the foreigners. That's the thing about Montreal that is different from the rest of Canada, is that any foreigner, even if it was an English-speaking Canadian, was the invader. It was, Montreal has been very proud for a long, long time. So it's a little bit like in Japan when they used to bring the big gaijin. It was an invasion each time. So you always had, going back to Yvon Robert, you always had that hero. And Dino fit the bill. He was Superman. I mean, he was strong. The one big thing that he did on television was do a bench press a little bit like he did at the Royal Rumble.
Yes.
That's one of the things, years later on the French television, they kept on talking about the time he did the bench press on TV. And that was like early on in the television run. And they kept talking about it, and more than likely when they redid it at the Royal Rumble, it was to attempt to create or recapture that same magic of a very powerful man. But they kind of played it in a different way, putting doubts into his strength, which Dino was actually very strong. So, I mean, and that's what make him so interesting in Montreal, because we believe that he was that super strong guy that no matter what or how tall or how big the bad guys were, Dino was stronger. And it's very simple, you would say, but we believed, and that's the whole key. And he was very charismatic. He was such an incredible fire babyface when he made his comeback. It was unbelievable. He would sell, and when he would make that comeback, people would go completely banana. So that always, to me, I mean, means a lot more now, because I understand better what they were doing, how they were hiding some of his weaknesses, and how they were putting everything on what he was really, really good at. and I don't know how good Dino was at booking, because in the sense of times, things have been very muddy as far as who was making decision. One thing is for sure on what match, but on it matches, Dino was a genius, because he used himself and did things, very small things sometimes, that to this day I remember. So he was a good babyface.
Bertrand talked about something that I think just proves how big of a deal Dino had become by the end of the 70s and early 80s, when he talked about being the NWA Canadian champion. He was actually, and most of those were not real belts, or I mean, it wasn't like defended like any other titles, but it was just a way to promote Bravo in Canada. But he was the only guy who was NWA, AWA, and WWF Canadian champion. So he was really the guy that the promotion were relying on, and that's how big he had become by that point in time. The other thing, and it's outside of Montreal, but it's also outside of the NWA, is his match with Abdullah the Butcher in Japan. I remember growing up that, I was reading about that match, a bloody war between Bravo and Abby in Japan that everyone wanted to see, I wasn't a tape trader, I was never a tape trader actually, but I remember Bertrand, among others, telling me that, it was a match that every tape trader wanted to see, because, it really went viral. it wasn't an expression back then, but if I can use a 2021 expression, you know, it was really viral. Everybody had heard about that match, and everybody wanted to see it. So it was. It was a big deal in Montreal, but also big promotions because you know, since international wrestling they were not outlaws, they were just an independent promotion using, like Bertrand said, you know, using talents from all the other big offices. Well, Dino was the guy that everybody wanted to use and everybody wanted to have. So when we talk so highly of him here in Montreal, and I mean, we're not the only ones that saw those things in him. You know, he was my favorite wrestler growing up. It became Hulk Hogan later on. I mean, I was a fan of Bravo before I became a fan of Hogan.
So you were a fan of the Canadian Hogan first.
I was what?
You were a fan of the Canadian Hulk Hogan first.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it was really, really special, and his interviews, is non-verbal. You know, he was Italian, right? So he had that Italian blood in him, you know, and then he was getting when he was getting mad, he was getting so mad and so red, and you know, you could feel that, you know, he was ready to just smash the heads of whoever heel was in front of him. And it got to you. You know, you were sitting at home in front of your TV set, and then you were just, oh yeah, get him. You know, he had that charisma that would, you know, go through the TV, go through the arena, and would make people just believe in him and say, you know, oh yeah, I'm behind Bravo. You know, he always gets his man. And the funny thing is that Dino was pretty much the same kind of guy outside of the ring. That's not something that we knew when we were a kid, but he, you know, he was he had a short temper. So in real life, so his persona in the ring, when he was, you know, Bertrand was talking about firing comeback. Well, he got a few firing comeback in real life as well.
So there's two things that you each brought up, and I just want to touch on them. First, Bertrand, you talked about how he was considered short, or I guess for that territory, but I just want to.
He would like to fight big guys.
Yeah, so
made him the shorter guy, but the most powerful guy. So when he was fighting Ken Patera, or he was fighting with Blackjack Mulligan, or even Hulk Hogan, he was smaller man. So he was the smaller man in the fight, but he was the most powerful man. In Montreal, that's what he projected. And he would, you know, I remember when the Masked Superstar laid him out. I mean, it was unbelievable. You know, he did not let Dino take his robe off, beat the crap out of him. You know, Dino was bleeding all over. They put a cigar in Dino's eye. You know, I mean, Gino Brito told us that the most successful program outside of the Rougeau and the Garvin as far as drawing money was Superstar and Dino Bravo, out of that one angle.
Wow.
When Superstar came in and beat the crap out of him and forced Dino to make a comeback, because nobody had treated Dino Bravo that way. So it's, you know, small things like that. So he always was very good as being slightly the smaller man of the fight. So that's why they brought all those big guys for him, and probably why he didn't like to have Andre come around and beat those big guys.
Probably not.
But it is what it is. Dino had that very rare charisma, and his fire was unbelievable in the ring when he was making that comeback. And Pat glanced over his interviews. I mean, the English interviews, they ended up putting a manager with him, and his English had a strong accent, but he was very good. You know, he rarely yelled in French, and he was making his points, and he come off so seriously. You know, it's always about making you believe. And when Dino said, well, it's not going to go this way, and I'm going to beat this guy, and if I don't beat this guy, I'm going to retire, or if I don't do this, and you believe the guy. You know, he if Dino said something, it's going to happen. And that adds value to a promotion, especially locally with the television that International Wrestling had put together. It created the last big local wrestler, in the vein of the Johnny Rougeau and the Yvon Robert. He was that guy. He was the god of Montreal wrestling. So, and that's exactly the spot that he wanted, I think, from day one.
Pat, just to follow up on something that you had brought up, you were talking about his time in Japan. There's one match in particular that he had in Japan that I've watched it, and I think it's incredible, and that is Dino Bravo and Ricky Choshu versus Hulk Hogan and Stan Hansen. Now, if we normally don't talk about matches per se on this program, but good Lord, if you want to see four guys beat the holy hell out of each other to a double countout, I believe it was a draw, I believe, actually, time of a draw, but my God, you're talking about a guy who is so well respected and well revered in different countries and territories, not necessarily, yes, we're going to get into the WWF, whatever you want to call it, portion of his career soon, but just, you go see NWA, he has a great run, he does these great things in Japan, he obviously is a superstar in Canada, it's incredible, the impact that he has, just, a guy who's essentially imported from Italy, grows up in Montreal and makes a name for himself.
Yeah, I mean, Dino, he wasn't the best worker in the ring, but he looked the part, and he was so muscular, and even if he wasn't like a tall guy, he was still, a strong, bulk kind of guy, where, everything he did was credible. Even to this day, people still believe that he really did bench press 700 and I don't remember, 735 pounds, 750 pounds, whatever the number was, with Jesse Ventura and everything. I mean, it was still something almost credible because he was so strong and so big. In Japan, he could use his physique, even if he wasn't like the best worker in the ring. He could use his upsides and make sure that everyone would believe everything he did was believable, and that was one of his strongest suits. So whether it was in the NWA or in Japan or here in Montreal, or elsewhere in Canada, he would always get that done, and that's just one of the reasons why he was so successful.
715 pounds, which would have been the world record. Yes, you're the ballpark. Yeah,
I knew it was a 5 somewhere. So
yeah, that would have been a world record at the time for sure. I want to get into his second stint, or the most memorable one, either way the coin you want to look at it, with his run with the WWF, when he returns in late 86, I believe. Either one of you who wants to jump on this one, I'm not sure who to ask, but who made the decision to change his look? And if it was not his decision, what did he think of the change in his look and presentation?
I think Bertrand can go in more details than me. I just want to say something, is that most Quebecers turn out to turn heel in WWF. So there was something of a pattern here.
Oh, it's more than most. I don't mean to cut you off. It's more than most. I think just about every Quebecer is a heel, except for maybe the current Mr. Owens is about the only one who's not.
Yeah, and he's trying a lot to stay babyface. Let me
yes.
tell you this. So whether it was the Rougeau brothers, whether it was Dino, Rick was maybe the guy that Vince kept babyface the longest out of the Quebecers, but there's always been a pattern, you know, and after that the Monty and even the Quebecers with PCO and even Sylvain Grenier, you know, so there's always been that pattern of turning heel, turning Quebec wrestlers heel. So it was not that surprising when you look at it from today's perspective. But I'll let Bertrand go into more detail about that.
I mean, obviously, getting the Quebec wrestler, whether it was the Rougeau, Martel, Bravo, was part of the WWE business at that time. Is that they were running so many house shows, and Montreal was to become part of the circuit and the rest of Canada. So they needed those local talent, and in Montreal, that implied they were going to be drawing big houses at the Montreal Forum, and that implied Dino Bravo. But if you keep Dino Bravo as a babyface, then you're going to have a serious issue when both Hogan and Dino Bravo are on the same card, because people are going to have to choose. And you know, from the mouth of Jerry Briscoe, they were far from certain that Hogan would not have been booed, and they would not risk that, and they went right away, right off the bat, to have Dino turn heel, because they saw him as a potential opponent for Hogan. And for sure, Dino saw also that there was a lot more money if he was going to be on top with Hulk Hogan than, you know, being just one of another babyface behind Hogan. So obviously, I mean, I think he saw big money. I think he was probably a little bit let down, because except for a few matches in Montreal where he wrestled for the title with Macho Man, and he had a big match with Hulk Hogan at the Forum after getting him out on a stretcher on the show before with a bear hug, he didn't get a lot of a big main event house show with Hulk Hogan, except much later on when he was teaming with Earthquake and things of that nature. So I think he probably was a little bit, it was probably a little bit of a letdown that he was never like one of the main Hogan opponents for a big program. But obviously, I mean, that was the role for him. I mean, there was no room for a second fiddle babyface Dino Bravo. But as a top guy heel, there was potential. With him getting more muscular, he got less agile. As a heel, he was less spectacular, and clearly and fast, he was not the same wrestler as he used to be in Montreal. But you know, when I remember those matches that he did in Montreal, and you know, they were just like the old days. However, you know, I saw the difference in between the first match with Macho Man, when the heel turn of Dino was pretty fresh, to when he finally wrestled Hogan. You know, there was no doubt when he wrestled Hogan at the Forum that, you know, Hogan was the babyface and Dino was the heel. So they made it work for them, and what they were afraid of by the time they put them together in the ring was long gone. And to get there, you needed to get Dino as a heel. That's just the nature of the business. And even if he was let down, I'm sure that he made more money as a heel and with those big runs with Macho Man and with Hogan in Montreal and Toronto, among other cities, than he would have had as, I don't know, being a babyface, middle of the pack, wrestling Honky Tonk Man for the IC Championship.
I mean, Bravo and Hogan, if in 1986, if they would have been able to book that, they could have, you know, Montreal never used the Olympic Stadium as a wrestling venue. But if there is one match that could have, I don't want to say filled the Olympic Stadium, but it's a very large stadium. But you know, they could have done a very, it could have been the biggest wrestling show ever in Montreal. So I'm talking about north of 30,000 people.
A match worthy of the stadium.
I'm sorry?
Worthy of the stadium.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You know, before they turned Bravo heel. You know, when Bravo, in 86, Bravo still had that aura of a big baby face. I mean, he was still a big baby face in 86 before he joined WWF. So if they would have done that match that year, I mean, they would have done big numbers. But Vince didn't want to go there because obviously he wanted Hogan to be his top babyface everywhere. You know, not only in the U.S. or not only on his TV, but really everywhere he was going. So it's really something that could have, you know, it's one of the major what ifs in the history of Quebec wrestling.
There's another little wrinkle to all this, but I'm not sure how much he plays a part of it in, is that in Canada, if you're producing Canadian content for television, you need to have a certain amount of Canadian talent, whether it's on screen, behind the screen, in the credits, whatever. Do you think that played a little or a large part to the WWF bringing Dino Bravo back into the company? The fact that they're expanding more into Canada, they need to be able to feature Canadian talent to get the go-ahead, quote-unquote, to be able to air their programs in Canada.
I have never heard that being a reason before.
I think that the reason, they just by producing so much television in Ontario, that took care of that. The talent itself was irrelevant to that situation.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those. It's such a tricky thing. It's the amount of Canadian content in your programming. Okay, so what does that really boil down to? Does that mean, you know, the people producing? Does it mean where it's produced, etc.? But yeah, to your point, yeah, if they're producing tons of in Ontario as they were at the time, then that totally makes perfect sense to me. So I just want to go back to the 1988 Royal Rumble. We briefly touched on it, but that's the one where he had bench pressed the 715 pounds that we previously spoke about, with Jesse the Body Ventura just using his little pinkies, as he said, to help Dino pick up the bar. But that was all to put over this really the strong style, quote unquote, that he was going to be wrestling, because like you guys said, he kind of shied away from, you know, a lot of the high flying, a lot of the drop kick spots and whatever. As he bulked up, he really did turn himself into that really brawler, really rough and tumble kind of wrestler.
I mean, yes. I mean, that was one of the biggest feature that Dino ever had on a WWF show. Because he was usually part of an ensemble at Survivor Series, or he was part of a tag team match on like Saturday Night Main Event or things like that. But that was his own feature on the Royal Rumble. And you know, I loved it as a kid because, as a kid, I mean, I was just, pushing on 18. But
still a kid.
I loved it because, you know, that was my Dino Bravo. That was Superman. You know, and it was like, oh my God, you know, and you kind of, Jesse, why he was spotting him, you know, you would
he never touched the bar, come on.
So, but that, I think they never truly exploited that after that, and I don't think, you know, Vince or Pat or any of the power decision maker in WWF saw Dino at a higher level than the level he was when he was there, basically. I don't think they ever saw him as a main event player on a regular basis. So, and he was getting older. I mean, Rick Martel tells us, you know, towards the end, you know, he even offered to put them together, because when Rick Martel and Dino Bravo would team together in Montreal, international champion, AWA world champion, teaming together to face the Road Warriors. I mean, that was the Mega Power before there was the Mega Power. So for Quebec wrestling, that was the team, and they were a very good tag team. And Rick pitched the idea of them together as a team, with him taking all the bumps and Dino being the strong guy. And I think they could have had a really, really good run that would have stretched Dino's career. But they never saw that. Dino was getting older. And, you know, Dino, from all perspective, Dino was the kind of guy who would, you know, say F you if things didn't go his way or if he was unhappy about it. So obviously, you know, politically, I'm pretty sure Dino was not the kind of guy who made a lot of friends backstage or played the political game or kissed a lot of ass. So obviously, he was probably not the most popular guy of the bunch.
And not only that, but I mean, Dino had a very high opinion of himself, of his work in the ring, of his talent. So, and he was always, he had been the top guy in Montreal for so many years. So to be used in a mid-card position with WWF, without getting any real program to the big title and stuff like that, even more at the end when Vince didn't even see, how he could use him anymore. I think that Dino really, he thought he could still go, and he didn't really take that well. And when Rick offered Vince or suggested to Vince that he could team up with Dino, it was mostly to avoid Dino of working in the mob, with the mob and doing what he was doing. It was, in a way, he was trying to save him from what ended up happening, right? So from his fate, so that's why Rick, as a good friend as he was to Dino, he wanted at least to try something with Vince, and Rick knew how to be a tag team. He proved it with Tom Zank, he proved it with Tito Santana, so he knew what to do to make a good tag team work. And I would actually, I mean, I'm still wondering today if that team, even in the early 90s, I think that, that something could have been done with the two of them, and who knows what would have happened to Dino if that would have happened, if Vince would have agreed. I'm not putting anything on Vince, that was always Dino's choices. But he chose a life he decided to. But that's why it was such a big letdown for him, because it was $1 million job, literally. So there's not a lot of jobs that give you that much money, that fame, for without working like 90 hours a week. Yes. He was on the road all the time, but it was a different kind of work. He was a star. He was like a rock star. So the life he chose by the end of it was the only way he knew of making close to the money that he was making with Vince.
I guess it's disappointing on all sides of it, right? Because you have the fans like yourselves and people who have seen him in Japan, people who have seen him in the States outside of the WWF, who would look at his WWF run as kind of like untapped potential, right? He could have been this. He should have done this. He could have had a run with this, right? And then you look at it from Bravo's point of view. He comes in there, he changes his look, changes his style, then he's got a manager, then he's in a stable with Valentine and Beefcake, then he's in another stable, and then he's always just kind of bouncing around from mid-card position to mid-card position, never really getting his footing, never really establishing who Dino Bravo is in the WWF, and I'm sure that had to weigh heavily on him. You don't go from being a superstar in places in a city or like Montreal or a territory like that, or being a star in Japan or whatever, to now you're just kind of you're just in the shuffle. You're just one of the talents.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. He wasn't used of being used that way. He wasn't used of not being used at all, And he still thought that even though he was closing up on his, he was in his mid-40s or close to, he was still he had still a good shape, maybe not the best shape of his life, but he was still, very muscular and everything. So he really thought that he had some more years to give the company. And when Vince decides that you're too old, you're too old. He did the same thing with Randy Savage. Did the same thing with other people as well. So that's what that's when Dino didn't have a lot of options, because you got to remember that back in 1992, WCW wasn't what it would become a few years later. So WCW wasn't really an option for him at the time, So there was not like a lot of promotion that Dino could actually turn to and kept working. He would have had to gone probably to Japan, and even then, I'm not sure that it was still Japan material by then. So it was really a rough time on him. A really, really a rough time on him. And that's about the same time that he started making bad decisions, in his real life.
Just before we get any further, you brought up, not many places to go, and one place maybe would have been Japan. I don't know how he fits there, because in Japan at that time, in terms of international talent, you had Vader running wild there. You had, Stan Hansen was still there, I believe, and then you had the Steiners in there as well. So it would have been a tough road for him. To do that type of those types of matches and that type of schedule would have been very hard for him to keep up with.
I mean, obviously, Japan probably was not going to be, because the style was just going to go even more fast and even more hard than when Dino was still in his prime and a young man.
Yes.
Obviously, Dino, he did a few shots in Puerto Rico. The office had strong ties. The Montreal office had strong ties over there. But there was basically no place really to make money. I mean, WCW in those days, was bleeding money.
92 was a mess for them.
Yeah, and Dino would have had to move to Atlanta to work there, which is all stuff that he was not ready to do. He had that huge house in Montreal. He was a very proud Quebecer, very proud of his Montreal Canadians. There's a lot to think that he was attempting to raise enough money, and there's enough talks with Gino Brito and Jacques Rougeau to think that Dino was still hoping to end his career in Montreal as a big star, and he was hoping to start wrestling again at some point locally and try to start something that would have given him that platform, that stage to end his career on his terms. But obviously, when that was not meant to be. But it's hard. The WWF of the 1980s, that was really like the all-star team of all-star team, because everybody they brought in was a star somewhere. But obviously, when you bring everybody in the same territory, not everybody can be stars at the same level. That just positioning, timing, you never know how things are going to turn out. And like a movie casting, if the casting director of a wrestling show see you in a certain role, that's the role you're going to get. He's not going to start, seeing you in a different light just like that. And we see today that, it's not like Vince changes his mind about something when he decides that something is not good or something is at a certain level. It's very, very rare that this is going to change. It was what it was. It was also the only place to go in that time period to make the money that Dino made at the end. So what would he say today? That's very hard, as Dino was had an ego, but he also, I think, recognized that business was business, and that's, he would probably recognize that the WWE run was the run where he probably made the most money of all of his career. So things didn't turn out the way he wanted it, but sometimes you have to accept that. And I think if Dino had been a little bit more negotiate a little bit better and play his card a little bit better, things could have been different. But Dino was always my way or the highway. So I think that's the story of Dino Bravo.
Unfortunately, Dino being the my way or the highway, well, he's up against Vince, who is, as we all know, is very much my way or the highway. So he's not winning that one, I don't think, 10 times out of 10. So I guess...
Vince owns...
Sir, go ahead.
Vince owns the highway.
Yeah, so yes, he does. I guess there's a little bit of confusion, and this, again, goes to, depend on who you talk to. Now, was he released from his contract at the end of it, or did he retire? Because there's some people say that he retired and that wrapped it up on his own terms. Some of it said that Vince told him he wasn't going to renew it. Some say that Vince bought him out at the end. Pat, I don't know if you would be able to speak on that. Just what was the actual end of his run in WWF? What was the end of it that like?
It was really a bit of both. He wasn't happy of the way he was being used, and Vince didn't want to renew his contract. So when his contract came up, he didn't want to stay, and Vince didn't want to keep him. So he was never really just fired, and he didn't really quit. It was just a mutual agreeing that, I'm not happy. Okay, well, that's good because we don't want to use you anymore. Oh, okay then. And so that's pretty much what happened. He wasn't. He like I said, he thought that he could still. Being helpful to a promotion, and he didn't want to do what Vince wanted him to do by the end of it. And the tragedy about this is that they were supposed to do a big farewell show for him in 1992, and then that never happened. And nobody knows why. Or nobody remembers why, or maybe just Dino knows why, and he brought that in the grave with him. But Dino never really had this big retirement farewell because it would have not come from his part because he wasn't ready to retire. He still wanted to contribute to a promotion, like Bertrand said. Everything leads to believe that he wanted to start something locally, and at the end of it, that didn't happen either. But that's how he left WWF. It was just a mutual agreeing of we don't want to use you anymore. Well, that's good because I don't like the one being used, so I'm better going away.
Because in Montreal, they actually started. A babyface turn for him at the house show. He was back with black hair. He beat Jacques Rougeau on Barbarian on another show, and was never brought back for what would be led to some sort of a farewell or last show or retirement show at the Forum. That never came to be. I think it was used also one last time on the European tour. And where he also has the black hair, and that's about it. So it's never like it was like, I'm never gonna work for you anymore, or I'm mad, or we're never gonna use you. It was like we're not gonna use you full time. We're gonna try a few things. We're gonna use you in Montreal, and that didn't pan out really good, and nobody was happy apparently. Or Dino expected it maybe to turn into that tag team with Rick Martel, maybe, or maybe as a way to get his way back as a babyface, maybe in the big league. But that's not what they were seeing. They were giving him a farewell, but not a welcome back. So clearly, it was just not meant to be. And it's part of the question marks or the what if, or what was going on, what would have happened, that comes with Dino leaving us so soon afterwards.
Yeah, because Dino Bravo and Jacques Rougeau Jr. teaming up together to bring back a big time local promotion here in Montreal in 1992, 1993. It's a huge what if because it actually could have worked. You had Bravo was like the big. The last big local star, and you had Jacques Rougeau who who had the name. You know, he had the Rougeau name, and you know, Jacques ended up being one of the most popular wrestlers in the history of Quebec wrestling. Perhaps he wasn't to that level in 1992, 1993, but he wanted. I mean, and he started a local promotion in '94. But you know, Jacques on his own and Dino on his own could have not. I mean, Jacques, it didn't really. I mean, it worked to a degree, but not to the degree of bringing back a big time local promotion on TV. But with Bravo and with Bravo probably comes Gino Brito, and then probably Rick Martel, who a few years later would find himself out of WWF as well. You never know what could have happened. You know, maybe a Ray Rougeau comes back. I mean, no, Ray would have stayed with Vince. But either way, you know, there was. I think that as odd as it seems, I truly believe that Bravo and Jacques teaming together with you know, two big mouths like them, trying to just run everybody over here to make that happen. The contacts they had, the names they had. I mean, you know, we'll never know. But I truly believe it could have become something.
But it's also interesting to think with '92, and we were talking about earlier. You know, WCW is on their ass at that point. All their connections that they had from their time with Jim Crockett, well, most of them were still there at that point. So it's neat to think, like, okay, what if they start this up in Montreal now? What if they're cross-promoting with now WCW on Turner Television? It's neat to think what could have been if, obviously, cards had played out differently.
Yeah, but at the same time, WCW was never big on Canada. I mean, they stole Brett from WWF and never did anything with it.
No, that was one of the worst things ever.
I mean, how can you not have Bret Hart in your roster and not do a show in Montreal after what happened in 1997? You know, it always, you know, it blows my mind for years. You know, I just don't. And we're getting out of the Bravo thing for a second, but we did ask that question to Eric Bischoff, and he was like, well, you know, Canada wasn't really in our plans. You know, they were in and that's not him talking, that's me, but they were in the middle of a war with WWF, and the war was in the States. The ratings war was in the States. Everything was in the States. So Canada wasn't really a market that they thought they would, you know, that would help them win that war. And but at the same time, I just think that, you know, it was something that they could have really used with Brett. Can you imagine Brett in Toronto, Brett in Calgary, Brett in Montreal? I mean, it would have been big, you know, in every big cities throughout, you know, coast to coast, you know, Vancouver, even Winnipeg, you know, because it was Bret Hart. And even though he wasn't a guy from Montreal, he wasn't a French Canadian, after what happened at the Survivor Series, I mean, it would have been, it was big when he came back.
Oh my God, they could have printed money.
When he came back 15 years later. So can you imagine in 98, you know, what it would have been? So I'm really not sure if, I mean, Jacques did something on his own with Hogan when he was, you know, the leader of the NWO that drew close to 15,000 people at the Molson Center in 97 without WCW running it. They you know, it was his own promotion, renting talents from WCW. So even then, they didn't see fit to. I mean, if I'm WCW, I'm like, oh, what? You want to wrestle Hogan in Montreal? No, hold on a second. We want to chip in. You know, we want to be part of this.
Yes,
it's going to be big. But there's a big misunderstanding of the Montreal market for years from both WCW and WWF, and still to this day. So I'm really not sure that even though Bravo and Rougeau would have teamed to bring back a local promotion here in Montreal, that WCW would have picked on that and would have say, you know, something like, hey, let's team up with you guys. You know, you have something going on here. I mean, I just don't see it happening.
I guess they give them too much credit, because after all, they did get Bret Hart and made him a referee for their first match, so there's that. But
yeah, exactly. Because it was better, and it was the first Sting and Hogan match. So it was, you wanted to do that screw job finish again. That's what more. It was more important than anything else. So.
So after when Bravo leaves the WWF, he left in I believe it was April of '92. Did he go back to Montreal and start training wrestlers, or what was his kind of, we'll loosely say, career transition after his time with the WWF?
Well, I think we glanced over it. I think he did a few shots in Puerto Rico, was called back to do a European tour, and that's about it. I mean, I don't have any record of Dino even wrestling one indie match in Montreal. I don't think his ego would have let him wrestle in front of 200 people in a small building. If he was going to make a comeback here after WWE, he was going to make it, as the big star on the biggest stage he could create on the local scene. So I think we were at least a year away from something like that maybe happening. Mm-hmm. But he got caught in all of that, trying to raise money and keep the lifestyle that he had getting accustomed to, being a WWF wrestler. And then everything that we knew happened, and more than likely Dino's my way or the highway attitude could not go well in the world he ended up being caught in.
His transition into the quote-unquote mob life, part of that was him being an enforcer of sorts, if I'm understanding things correctly. If you are going to get somebody who looks like an enforcer, you probably want somebody who looks like Dino Bravo at the very least. Do you think that was it his look, or was it just his ties to the family that really got him kind of sucked into that lifestyle?
Both. He had the ties, and he had the look. He had the look to be someone who could scare anyone that needed to pay up to the mob. So, but he had the ties he had the connections to get in. But he had a hot temper, he had a short temper, and like Bertrand said, it doesn't really fit well in that world, So he was still Dino Bravo. He was. I don't think that at any point after leaving WWF and to the day he was murdered, that at any point he was Adolfo Bresciano. He was always Dino Bravo, and Dino Bravo was a proud superstar for years in Montreal, and he still had that mentality. So and he was that big tough wrestler at a time where the kayfabe was still something, and he still needed to protect his identity, he would have not let anyone bully him, because nobody bullies Dino Bravo. And whether it was a biker, whether it was a guy from the mob, or someone from the reserve, the Indian reserve, he was tougher than anyone in his mind, and he was a name. He was someone. So I think that's part of the reasons why he ended up the way he ended. And he was always like this, even back in the 80s when he was going to a hockey game, he had such a short temper that he once started a fight with the Quebec Nordiques coaches.
Yes, I heard about that.
So it was he was who he was, and unfortunately no one could actually reason him to not be in this kind of this kind of line of work. It was not a good fit for him, but it was the only thing he knew was wrestling. And I can't even imagine when that is being taken away from you, what kind of feelings you're going through, and especially when you have the lifestyle he had. There's not a lot of options, and maybe he thought that he was better than everyone, and that it wouldn't happen to him. He was scared a few times. His wife told me that, one time, especially she remembered that, he seemed scared, and he didn't know what would happen to him. But he wouldn't let that show to anyone else. So that was, yeah. I mean, it's such a sad ending when you think about it, because he had everything for him. And his wife wanted them to move. She didn't need the big $1 million house in suburban of Laval, just north of Montreal. She didn't need that. They could have lived happily in a smaller house, but that's where that's where Dino Bravo came in. And Dino Bravo was a big star to the eyes of fans, to the eyes of the population, and Dino Bravo had to live in a big house. He had to have a few cars, a Mercedes and all that. So he didn't see himself going backward. He just thought of ways of keeping himself afloat, and that's when you start making bad decisions. So.
Bertrand, I'm not sure if you would know the answer to this or not, but so he's doing the I know I'm phrasing this terribly, but he's doing the enforcer role. Like, I'm talking like we're doing wrestling gimmicks, but he's being the enforcer for the mob, essentially. Then he starts moving into contraband, and that's when he was moving into the cigarette smuggling, I believe, correct?
Correct.
So, for our international listeners, because it's quite different here in Canada, a lot of people will think like, oh, well, cigarettes, why are you smuggling them? Well, in Canada, cigarettes are heavily, heavily taxed. A large portion of that tax goes towards paying for our national healthcare system. So, when you can get non-taxable cigarettes from the reserves, which they are, from the indigenous reserves here in Canada, that's a big money market, and that's something that he had got himself mixed up involved in, correct?
Yes, I mean there was money back then in that traffic. They were bringing in cigarettes from the U.S. and there was a lot of reselling, and people. You don't have to imagine it as being like a pack of cigarettes. We're talking truckloads of cigarettes. So, I mean, at that point in time, that was huge, and everybody had their hand in it. And Dino thought probably that this was a quick and easy way to make money.
Yeah, we're not talking like a pack of cigarettes. We're talking like semi-trailers full of cigarettes. Like, this was no Mickey Mouse operation. This is a large scale. It was a big deal.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that, and just to make sure that people who are listening know about this, but when we say that Dino had ties to the mob, I mean, but at the time that Dino was involved in it, the Rizzutos were the big, the big family here in Montreal, and it was a big family throughout Canada as well, mob family, I should say, but Dino's ties to the mob was through the Cotronis. Vic Cotroni was the godfather here in Montreal, or should I say presumed godfather in Montreal, before Vic Rizzuto, Vito Rizzuto. It was Vic Cotroni, and Vic was Dino's uncle. So that's the link with the mob. But by the time that Dino was involved with this, the Cotronis weren't the big players anymore. It was the Rizzuto. But still, the Cotronis name carried weight in Montreal. So I'm pretty sure that part of Dino's reasoning about being a tough guy in the mob was that, hey, I'm part of the Cotronis, they can't touch me, but that wasn't the case anymore, because the Cotronis weren't what they used to be, and he did stuff that wasn't going to be backed up by some of those guys, so at the end of it, so at the end of it, Dino wasn't, I don't know, he wasn't, someone should have taken Dino's, aside and just tried to talk to him and say, hey, listen, that's not going to work, but at the same time, very few people could have that talk with Dino. A guy like Gino Brito could have that talk with Gino, but Dino didn't want to involve Gino at all, because he knew what could have happened, and the less Gino would have known, the less he would have been in trouble, if something happened. And that's exactly what happened. Gino didn't know much about what Dino was doing, or at least he didn't know much from Dino, and that was the important thing for Dino, to kind of protect Gino to all that stuff. So he was linked to the Cotronis. The Cotronis, who actually, as a trivia note, Vic Cotroni used to wrestle
really?
back in the 1930s here in Montreal. So it's kind of funny to well, not funny, but it's just a trivia note that the big godfather that he became, he actually started as a pro wrestler in Montreal.
I'm just reading a little bit. So the Cotroni family they were a part of the Bonanno crime family, I believe, right? Like they were kind of like the Big Five, they're called, families in New York City. So they at one time had a ton of influence, but like you said, maybe at this point in the early 90s, not as much as they used to.
No, exactly. Their influence wasn't what it used to. They weren't in charge of Montreal anymore. So the landscape has changed. It was a big name throughout the end of the 70s, early 90s, early 80s. But 10 years later, they were. I mean, like I said, even to this day, if you talk about the Cotronis, it's still something, but it's not. It's nowhere close to what it was if Dino would have joined the mob. 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier.
I guess so. And obviously, we're speaking. All of this is allegedly, if you will. But so he starts as the enforcer. He moves on to cigarette smuggling. Did he have a role to play in cocaine smuggling as well, or is that just conjecture from what you guys can tell?
We don't know for sure. It's more conjecture than anything else, as there was some sort of cocaine bust that was kind of linked to him when he passed away as one of the many possibilities. Because what happened at the end is that Dino did something that was probably purely Dino, got a lot of attention on a bunch of people who do those big cigarette deal or big whatever deal. Those people, they don't want attention.
No.
They want a profile. They don't want nobody to know they were there, and they want to go in and out. Well, Dino, he wants to be everywhere. He wants to be the center of attention. So having Dino Bravo around your operation was not the smartest move as far as not drawing attention from the authorities. So obviously, Dino was somewhere responsible for something, and instead of being humble about it or anything like that, it's our understanding that Dino couldn't care less, and got a lot of people mad. There was a lot of money lost, and they decided to make a case out of it. And it was not because he was Dino Bravo that he was going to be any different from anybody else. That's Dino. And that's, for a guy who loved attention so much and loved to be the star, and in a lot of way, I mean, he's like Andre the Giant, who never lived really as Andrei Roussimoff. Dino Bravo was Dino Bravo. I don't know who was Adolfo Bresciano. Does he even knew who he was outside of being Dino Bravo? So going into that business, it's kind of the opposite. If you go into that business, you're supposed to be, that fly on the wall. Nobody notice. You do your thing. You move to the next thing, and the less people know who you are and what you're doing, the better. But that has nothing to do with the Dino Bravo we all know.
No, being a bull in a china shop is not conducive to life in that venture. Go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I was just going to say that if there is one thing, when Bertrand said, it's not because he was Dino Bravo that it would have stopped them of killing him. If there's one thing, perhaps because he was Dino Bravo, they did what they did, because it would send a strong message. If we can get rid of Dino Bravo, we can get rid of anyone. So perhaps, it didn't even help him being, that well-known celebrity here in Quebec.
So I guess we'll get into the unfortunate end of his life. I want to read a quote here from Bret Hart's book because, again, I've said this in the previous podcast. This is one of my favorite biographies that ever written in wrestling, anyways. But in Bret Hart's book, he writes, "Wrestlers' deaths continue to come in threes. After Andre and Kerry, the boys openly wondered who'd be next. It was Dino Bravo, only 44 years old. On March 10th, Dino was found in his home near Montreal. He'd been shot 17 times, so that the precise shots formed a circle in the back of his skull. Rumor was that he had double-crossed the mafia and trafficking of contraband cigarettes. A nervous Dino had recently confided to close friends that his days were numbered." And this is like, man, this is somebody who worked with Dino, who had conversations, meals, all that good stuff, and Jesus, I can't imagine what it would have been like for the people in the business. Also, how he was found. It's not nice to talk about, but unfortunately, he was found by his wife, and thank God she was sleeping. But his daughter, he was murdered in the course of watching a Montreal Canadiens game. If I read everything correctly.
Yes.
There's no real way to transition into that, but just what kind of news or what kind of story did this mean in Montreal? Was this like front page, wall to wall, everything? Was there automatically a ton of conjecture? Was this on the top of everyone's mind when it happened? Like what was the state of the news scene in Montreal when this comes out that this man Dino Bravo was murdered in his own home?
It was everywhere. It was everywhere. It made all the news station. It made all the newspapers, most of them front page. And that lasted a few days, at least until his funeral. Because it was not like a car accident or anything like that. So there was that old crime thing that was unsolved and remains unsolved. So obviously, I mean, it made the news. Because Dino was such a huge star, and it was such an unusual way to go. It is what it is. I remember faxing all the Gazette's article to Bill Apter for Pro Wrestling Illustrated and all that. It was a huge story, and it hit hard because I believe that Andre passed away, Kerry Von Erich passed away in all that same time frame.
Yeah, that was the same couple of months at least, for sure.
So for wrestling fans, I mean, it was quite the shock, and for the Montreal wrestling fan, I mean, that's still two of the biggest stars of the last 10 years that were gone just like that in their 40s. So that hit hard, obviously, and so that's the power of what the Dino Bravo names meant back then. And people, on a regular basis, when you have people that saw him as kids, I mean, that Dino Bravo name is mentioned on a regular basis. From here and there, when they would talk about wrestling, it's the Gino Brito and the Dino Bravo and all of that. So it's sad because he's never going to know his grandchildren. He never learned to have an adult daughter. And he was never able to see what wrestling has become or be a part of the scene locally, and maybe make peace with all of that. It's a very sad story among many other sad stories. I'm not sure about Brett's facts though about the circle on the back of the head. That I think that's a little bit more detailed that was ever released, but that's okay. That's Brett's reality. But it's Dino was larger than life, and he went out larger than life. So that's the Dino Bravo story.
I guess with I can't speak for Bret Hart. Obviously, I am not Bret, but maybe it's one of those things where you hear a tidbit of information. They did this to him or whatever, and then it gets played up, and then that's kind of what you, like you said, you have it in your own reality. If that's what he had heard or is led to believe, then who am I to say anything about that?
But I mean, it was a brutal murder. I mean, don't get us wrong. I mean, it was, it was shot in the head for real many times. So that wasn't. It's not like it was far from reality. But I mean, there were so many things being said. At the time, and even more when you look at it from a 15-year perspective. So, but at the end of the day. He was brutally murdered, and because of his involvement in the organized crime, and because he effed up a few things, so that was his reality, and that's what happened. But I mean, Dino Bravo's name. Will always live here in Montreal because of that to a degree, and of course because of the wrestler he was and the star he was. I mean, even just recently there was a sitcom, not a sitcom, but just a series, TV series here in Montreal, and they were the plot is that they are back in the mid 70s. And they made a character named Dino Bravo, and he was really Dino Bravo, the wrestler. So just to show you that everyone who actually lived through the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s know who Dino Bravo is, and in a weird way, because of the way he died. Probably that he will be remembered for a longer time than others. So yeah. I mean, that's like Bertrand said. It's a sad story for so many reasons. But that's who Dino Bravo was.
When the episode of The Dark Side of the Ring came out, the assassination of Dino Bravo, did that rekindle interest in his story, or has this always kind of been in the background of Montreal sports and wrestling fans ever since?
It was brought back to the news there's a few newspapers or radio station or stuff like that media who talked about the documentary and bringing back the wrestler, but also how he was murdered. So yeah, it was a little back in the news because of it, but at the same time it was an American documentary in English that wasn't even on our TV here. It was online, so it got interest, but it got mainly interest from people outside of Quebec than in Quebec, because of most people who I mean, not most people. I mean, there's a lot of people who watched it here, but it wasn't mainstream here. It's not on a TV channel that you can just flip your TV. You had to. It was on Crave TV, which you need to be, which you need to subscribe to, and through a laptop or iPad or something. So I'm guessing that the same documentary in French on a TV station, a regular TV station, does a lot more interest and create a lot more interest than that one did. But that documentary was talked about everywhere, like pretty much all the other Dogs Out of the Ring documentaries. But if I can compare it to the HBO documentary on Andre, my social media were like a lot more busier from that documentary than when I did the HBO on Andre, which is kind of surprising if you think of it, because Andre was a much worldwide star than Dino was. An HBO documentary, an HBO documentary versus a Vice documentary isn't even comparable when you think of it. But it did create a lot of interest. In Montreal, it did, but to a degree.
As we start to wrap up this evening, I'd just like to get your guys' thoughts. First off, with you, Bertrand, what do you think Dino's legacy is in wrestling, and what do you think that wrestlers can learn, not obviously from the end of his life, but what lessons do you think that somebody can take from his career path in wrestling and kind of maybe modify their trajectory, if you will?
I mean, Dino's time is much different than today, so it's kind of hard to see the influence. I mean, I think Dino's influence, like a lot of the stars of the 80s, is that you have to take care of your business while you're making the money. You have to invest, you have to take care of it, so that when the time comes and the curtain falls and you have to walk out for the last time, that there's a life for you afterwards. That's the inspiration that you need to get out of it. And I wish like guy like Rick Martel and Ray Rougeau, who have taken themselves out of the limelight, but they took care of their money, invested, worked on their investment after their career, are well off today, living a good life, enjoying life. I mean, I wish there were more stories like their story out of those era. And it's too bad for Dino that he did not do the same. And that's really, I mean, I think that's the one thing that people should look at, is that he's the prime example of that. You need to take care of your business while you're making those big contracts, to take care of it, making sure that, there's going to be a life for the real you after your character is out of the spotlight.
Pat, I'll ask you, what do you think that Dino's legacy in the Montreal wrestling scene is and will be?
It will be a legacy of one of the most popular wrestlers of all time. I mean, there's Yvon Robert, Johnny Rougeau, Mad Dog Vachon. If you want to go outside of Quebecers, Edouard Carpentier and Dino Bravo. that's the legacy he's having, and because of the way, and I mean, I guess a guy like Kevin Owens will probably be close to those guys, by the end of his career in a different way, because he didn't make a name of for himself only in Quebec, while guys like Bravo and Rougeau and Vachon and everybody else were bigger stars in their own provinces, in their own province. But at the same time, Bravo was such a character, such a large, big. He was a big character. He was a big time wrestler who had the chance to work when wrestling was still on top here in Montreal. So I mean, of course, the way he passed away will always be there. That's like the Montreal screw job will always be linked to Montreal. You cannot, talk about wrestling in Montreal without talking about this. Well, you cannot talk about Dino Bravo without talking about how he died. But to the sports fans, to the wrestling fans, he will be remembered as one of the most popular wrestlers here in Montreal. And for someone like Bertrand and I, who grew up with this generation, well, he's probably our one of our favorite wrestlers of all time. I know Bertrand was more of a Rick Martel guy. I was a Bravo guy. So that's all, rivalry Quebec Montreal. But still, when and Bertrand has the perfect answer for this, and I'm going to quote him because I heard him say so many times. But when people ask us, who's your favorite wrestler, Bertrand always say, and tell me if I'm wrong, Bert, but he always say that your favorite wrestler is the one that you grew up with. And to me, that was Dino Bravo. So if you ask me today, who was your favorite wrestler? Who is your favorite wrestler? I'm gonna go back to my roots. I'm gonna go back to why I fall in love with the world of professional wrestling, and Dino Bravo is a huge part of that. So that's going to be his legacy here, and that's what he means to someone like me.
Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs, the untold story of how Montreal shaped the world of wrestling. Sorry, pardon my French, if you will. Tremendous read. It's going to be a link to it on tinyurl.com/grappling with Canada. Before I let you guys go, Bertrand, you first. Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Bertrand Hebert. And, come and join us. We have more projects in the future, and we have that Andre the Giant book still hot off the press in both French and English.
And Pat, how about yourself? How can everybody get in touch with you?
Yeah, same thing. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Pat Laprade, Laprade. So that's a very French name. So always fun to talk some wrestling with any fans, and looking forward to talk to any of your listeners about the great wrestling history here in Montreal.
Well, I will say that I'm looking forward to whatever next project you guys have on the horizon. Once again, thank you both for joining the program tonight. And thank you for all the fantastic work that you do on the books. I haven't got the Andre one yet. That's on my list of things. I know, I'm awful.
What?
I've got a stack of books that I have to get through, but I'm going to be adding that one to the list.
You should my stack.
What's that?
That's no reason. You should see my stack.
Yeah, but you probably at least got into yours. I'm buried in paperwork, as they say.
See, if he was still with us, I would send Dino Bravo to you to make sure you buy that book.
Oh yeah. Well, me getting it is not the problem. That's the I've heard nothing but good things for it, so I'm looking forward to picking that one up. But thank you guys both again very much for joining the program tonight, and I hope to have you both on at a later date for maybe friendlier topic, but we'll see what the future brings anyways. Thank you both very much for joining the program tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Before we head to the finish of today's program, I'm going to play one more audio clip. Now, this is an interview of Dino Bravo from 1992, where he's kind of laying out the plans of his future for 92 and into 93. And this goes back to something that Pat, Bertrand, and myself were talking about in the earlier interview, is how Dino still saw himself as a main event top guy, regardless of the positioning that he was getting put in. So you hear him talk about that. You'll kind of hear a little bit of dejectiveness in his voice. If you listen for it, it's there. And who knows, maybe that's just me projecting. I'm not really sure, but it's crazy to think that he has all these future plans, which he lays out in this interview, and then, a year from now, he's out of the WWF into, an alleged life that we discussed earlier, and then obviously towards his untimely passing. So I'm going to play this interview clip next. Again, this is Dino Bravo from WWF in 1992, and then we're going to head to the finish of the program after this.
Bravo. And Dino, I have to admit, you were very impressive at the Montreal Forum against the Barbarians.
Thank you very much, Raymond. As you know, I had a motorcycle accident in July, and a lot of people thought my career was jeopardized, but I came back. I feel great. I've been working out steady, and I'm looking to make an impressive return in the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, your return was impressive with the Barbarian, and I was quite concerned, and a lot of people were asking me, if Dino Bravo was going to be the same wrestler he was after that motorcycle injury. But the question has been answered, and everybody saw it at the Montreal Forum. Dino, you're in great shape.
It was a good test because, Barbarians are one of the most impressive athletes in the World Wrestling Federation, 300 pounds of massive muscles, and it was a test, and I went through it, and I feel good about it, Raymond.
Okay, right now, let's talk about the future. Dino Bravo, 1992. What's lined up?
Well, whatever they come up with. As you know, my job is to stay in tip-top shape, and I'm doing that, and I feel good doing it. As you say, I'm at the peak of my career, although I'm not getting any younger. I feel better as I ever felt before, and as I said, I'm looking for a lot of competition, and why not championship matches, anything. I'm ready.
Well, Dino, you look better now than you have in your whole career, and actually, this tan helps. Dino just came back from a trip to Hawaii here, and you look very rested.
Thank you very much. I'd like to wish a Happy New Year. Everyone in Quebec, especially people in Montreal, have been supporting me the last 15 years, and Happy New Year to all and each of one of you.
Dino, it's always a pleasure to have you here. One thing I want to ask you, are you still bench pressing close to 700 pounds?
Well, I'm still pushing the heavy iron, but as you know, I came back from an injury. I don't want to get hurt, so I'm doing my workouts with the heavy weights, but not as heavy as I did 5-6 years ago, because it can hurt you in the ring. I can still do a good job doing what I'm doing right now.
You made quite a turnaround. The people in Montreal are crazy about you right now. Everybody's talking Dino Bravo, Dino Bravo. Are you going to go into politics? Are you going to be going for mayor or something?
No, wrestling has been my whole life. I still love it, and my ambition is to still wrestle for the next few years.
As I finish up today's program, I just really need to thank the guests that I had on today's program. Conor McKenna from TSN 690, the English sports leader in Montreal. Pat Laprade and Bertrand Hebert. Now, once again, all of us wrestling fans owe Pat Laprade a tremendous debt of gratitude for his work in getting that Dark Side of the Ring, the Assassination of Dino Bravo episode done, because honestly, it wouldn't exist without him. And Bertrand Hebert honestly does so much fantastic work in literature. I know that when I had them on the program, I had really brought up the Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs book, but they have done tremendous others. Obviously, they eviscerated me for not getting the Andre the Giant book. That is on its way, I'm happy to report, and that one is going to be available, the link to it, at least at tinyurl.com/grapplingwithcanada, so no more eviscerating me as you heard on the program, but also, Bertrand is the one who's behind the Pat Patterson biography, which I'm also looking forward to getting that one as well. Not like I'm trying to telegraph anything from later episodes of this podcast, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but again, these two just do a tremendous job of really bringing the history of the Quebec, and more specifically Montreal's wrestling scene to really all of us fans, not just Canadian fans. And it's something that we talked about, and it gets overlooked, especially out in the West. We don't really have a large connection with Quebec, although in Manitoba we have a very large French-Canadian population. And we have very large French-Canadian events and Métis events, like the Festival de Voyageurs that runs every February. But I digress. One of the points that Conor brought up is something that I want to touch on before we really get to the end of the program today, and that is connectivity. And that's not just, and obviously connectivity with your family and with your friends is very important. I highly encourage everybody, especially in this time of the pandemic, reach out to your friends, reach out to your family, maybe do it more than you would have normally, because God only knows what this thing is bringing to everybody, right? So it doesn't always matter what you are going through. Maybe you're in a fantastic place in life, and truthfully, I hope that you are. But you don't know what your friends are going through. You don't know what your family is going through. So I highly encourage everybody, take that little bit of time. Reach out to your family. Reach out to your friends. Let them know you love them. And that goes as well for even just people you talk to on Twitter. I know that many of us have, probably hundreds or thousands of followers, and maybe you don't really know them, but maybe you should take that little bit extra time to understand their points of view on some things. Now, obviously, there are points of views that you should be omitted, QAnon and bullshit like that. I don't mean to swear, and I don't mean to make light of the situation, but that's the reality. But if we all did a little bit better of a job to get to know one another, to get to know each other's backstories, not just Western Canadians and Quebecers, not just Western and Eastern Canadians, not just Canadians in the international market, but everybody. If we just took that little bit of extra time, get to know somebody else, drop a line, hey, how you doing? Are you holding up through this whole pandemic thing? This thing is hard. It's been really hard on a lot of people, and we just had passed the Bell Let's Talk Day. For anybody who doesn't know, it shines a light on mental illness initiatives in Canada. That's every January 27th, I believe. Look, it's a fantastic promotion that they do, and I shouldn't call it a promotion. That's a very poor choice of words, but it's a great thing that they do. But this is not something that we should limit to one day a year to be talking about. Mental health is something that affects almost everyone, and it's really touched my family this year in a way that I've never felt before. I've been a strong proponent of mental health initiatives before this year. I'm even more so now. So again, I can't stress it enough. Everybody reach out to somebody. Tell them you love them. Those very simple words could really change somebody's perspective. It can make their day. And isn't that what we're all here for, right? Is to really try and do something special for somebody else. Make a positive impact in somebody else's life. And that's all I can say about that. I don't want to get all super emotional and super preachy or whatever with you guys, but those are my thoughts, and that's just kind of what I wanted to leave you all with the program. So, with that being said, join us next month for another episode of Grappling with Canada. I'm going to be giving little spoilers of what you can expect on that episode in the next few weeks on Twitter, so you want to keep it locked at 6_podcast. Once again, tinyurl.com/grapplingwithcanada is where you can go for the links to all the books and all the people that we had on this program and the past program. Also, youtube.com/c/six-sided podcast. We are racing towards 1,000 subscribers, and like I talked about earlier on in the episode, once we hit that magical mark, I am going to be giving away a tremendous prize pack to one lucky viewer or listener. It depends how you look at it. And honestly, thank you, whoever you are listening, wherever you are in the world. You could have been anywhere else in the world. You could have been doing anything else in the world right now, but you chose to listen to this program, and for that, I am forever thankful. So for myself, the Taxman, for the guests that I had on today, I will leave you as I always do, and I mean it especially today. Take care of yourselves and each other. Take it easy, everyone.